Across Ireland, bishops have been forced to account for decades of clerical abuse. Can the Church now do the same with the Rafo report? That's the question people are asking in Donegal. People like my old neighbours, the Breslins.
Where was that? Up at Road?
Martin's Aunt Kathleen and her son Paul, who was also abused by Father Eugene Green.
That's me.
That's you.
That's Martin there.
That's the good-looking one.
That's the good-looking one's Martin. I was ugly. That's my little sister.
It's a lovely picture of the two boys.
First Holy Communion.
First Holy Communion with their rosary beads. How tough was it for you at the start when it all happened, when it all came out?
It was really tough. It was really, I remember the first night, Martin, the minute he told me, I knew. The minute he said it, I said, I know. When he mentioned Father Green, I knew right away, because I knew he took the two of them. So I knew what happened, because it was kind of starting to come out that time, you know, and I heard, you know, so Martin told me that night, so that was the beginning.
It's always depended on women. The woman represented the church in the house. She decided, you know, what mass you went to. She decided who went to confraternity. Have you been to confession? Was your mother asked you that question?
There was no saying no, you had to go. And that was it. It's changed, surely. There isn't as many going now.
Would people remark if you didn't go?
Yeah, oh, well, them days you had to go. You would...
Not one bishop, not one senior clergyman had stepped out of line, had been brave enough to say, I know more than everyone's saying, and it's wrong. Not one did it. And for women who had brought up children, who had done everything possible in their own households, that was an extraordinary breach of something they fundamentally believed in.
It was hard to believe it, because when you think that he came in here, you know, that he was in this house so often, you know, saying Mass, and it was hard to believe it, you know.
Paul Breslin was an altar boy when Father Eugene Green first took him away in his car. Always to quiet, isolated places.
I guess there's so much beauty here, but for me there's so much evil and so much hurt. I should be out playing with other 10-year-olds, but I wasn't. I was being taken down to the beach and raped. Age of 10, 11, 12. I had no life at all. I had no childhood, no fun. Nothing, was just pain, pain, pain. Every single week, pain. I would say to myself, why is God doing this to me? Like, I thought God was supposed to care, and the priests were supposed to care and not hurt a person, you know. Like, and I thought maybe I'm doing something wrong here, you know. Am I not doing a good enough job as an altar boy that he's punishing me for this? When I gradually went, you know, as I was growing up, when I was 14, 15, you know, even up to 16, you know, you're learning about, you know, everything about, you know, your body and everything. And then I would think, oh my God, I says, these things can happen to me. This is what he fucking done to me. And the pain got even worse then. That was, I was in there, and I couldn't tell anybody. I couldn't go to anybody. They wouldn't believe you anyway to start off with.
It's now clear that survivors have not been spoken to for the upcoming report, which is relying on the Church's own documents. I worry this will disappoint those who I have met.
Like, we weren't involved in this report. You know, we have to speak up, be heard. I want this, I want that. I want to see those files. I want to see that letter of complaint. I want to know why was he moved from this parish. You knew that he was doing it in that parish, but you moved him to the other parish. Why was he then moved from that parish to the other parish?
You want answers?
Of course we want answers. We want answers, big answers, definitely.
Father Eugene Green's crimes might have remained hidden, except for one man who'd been brutally abused, OMalley, telling his story for the very first time in public.
You'll never forget it. It's with you for the rest of your life.
and there's nothing you can do about it.
He has no faith that the church will admit to a cover-up. After a chance meeting in 1997, he tried to get Green to admit to his crimes.
That was, well, probably maybe a month after it. I went down and confronted him.
What did you say to him?
I told him I asked him did he remember me, and he said no. And I said, you remember abusing me when I was young? He says he never abused anyone. Never.
And what did you say to him? What did you do to him?
I caught him and flung him across the room. He was like, it was different then. I was a lot bigger than him.
What age had you been when he had abused you?
At 11.
You were a tiny child.
Yeah.
It was different now.
Yeah, it was different now.
So you picked him up and you...
I picked him up and flung him across the room.
And what did you say to him?
I can't remember exactly what I said to him, but I said I would fucking kill him. I think that's why it frightened him.
But he still didn't admit to knowing you?
No, he did not. He never admitted knowing me.
Cardinal then told the priest he wanted compensation, £5,000. But what did he do?
Well, he reported it to the guards. He reported me to the guards. Why, as if, I don't know, like that, as if he was innocent. Or he must have thought the guards would believe him.
Cardinal was arrested for attempted blackmail, but Father Eugene Green had miscalculated. The police were now prepared to believe the former altar boy and not the man with the Roman collar. Dozens of victims came forward. Father Eugene Green was convicted and sentenced to 12 years in prison. But what the church knew was never explained.
The big change then came from a number of individuals, because when the victims began to speak, when you saw somebody describing what their adulthood was like in the shadow of what had happened to them, there was an element of shame in this, that they'd been living with this. This had been going on in front of everyone's noses.
The big question across Ireland this morning, will the report into Donegal's Raphoe diocese help restore the church's reputation? What they're predicting in today's papers, the Irish Times, criticism likely for Raphoe bishops on child sex claims, right? If that is the sum of it, if it's just simply a mild criticism, that's not going to satisfy them. Absolutely not. I mean, at one point they would have been anxious for heads to roll. They know that's not going to happen now. But they absolutely want the church to own up, to fess up, to confess their role in hiding and covering up the crimes for more than 3 decades of Father Eugene Green.
Email seandoherty@highlandradio.com.
10 a.m, the local bishop, Philip Boyce, goes live on morning radio.
Well, it's an important day for the Diocese of Raphoe because the much anticipated report has just...
Retired detective Martin Ridge waiting to hear if any new information is revealed.
Nothing was done at the time. Now, we are talking about the late 70s, and there wasn't such awareness of child abuse at that time, and there certainly wasn't awareness of the damage.
There was awareness of it at the time.
To children, sometimes lifelong damage. Our parishes, as far as humanly is possible, a safe place for our children, because after all, our children
Pathetic, listen to that.
are our most precious possession.
Self-serving words and no more.
The society and the church of tomorrow.
Okay, let's take a short break.
Later, there's a massive media turnout for a press conference with Bishop Boyce.
I have spent endless hours and given much time and energy to eradicating this evil, repairing what is damaged as best I could, restoring justice and putting structures in place to prevent, as far as possible, this criminal sin from happening again. Finally, I would like to take this opportunity to say that the task of ensuring the safeguarding of young people in the Diocese of Roe is an ongoing one. Thank you. And
Bishop Boyce, can I ask you, pointedly, there is no specific criticism of bishops or of the Church in the way they handled Father Eugene Green, one of the country's most prolific paedophiles. There is no specific criticism of the way the Church or successive bishops handled him, including yourself. Does this report then, in your terms, exonerate bishops in the Church in the way they handled?
I'm not saying that it exonerates everybody. It just shows that at the time, these the information on these terrible things that happened weren't handed up as far as, let's say, as the bishop's office, and that word of that didn't come to us because there was no reference whatsoever to any allegation in the files which I saw when they came in.
The Church never intended the report to thoroughly investigate the past. It was restricted to an examination of diocesan files, and because nothing was found in the files, that is where it ended. It's clear that significant errors of judgment were made by successive bishops when responding to child abuse allegations that emerged within this diocese. But there's no reference to Father Eugene Green himself. I know if I was one of those who'd been attacked by Father Eugene Green, or if my brother or my child had been attacked by Father Eugene Green, and this is the sum of knowledge that the Church is admitting to now, I'd be absolutely outraged. I'd be furious. At the Cardinal Tribune newspaper, the presses are underway by late afternoon. The editor has made up his mind.
My biggest criticism of it, apart from that, is that here you have a nodded into clerical sex abuse. There is no terms of reference to talk to the abused. And you just ask the question, how can a report of any kind be completed without talking to the victims? Remember that a lot of these survivors have spent 35, 40 years literally imprisoned in their own minds, imprisoned in their own communities, and to a great extent have been hospitalised in psychiatric wards, have had nervous breakdowns, have had serious bouts of alcoholism, have had thoughts of suicide. The scenario is absolutely horrendous. And yet you contrast that against how the Church has handled it and how the institutions of the Church have totally failed those people. And today's audit, to me, does nothing to address their concerns and their health problems.
What will your front page say tonight?
We'll be simply saying that diocesan audit is a whitewash.
A whitewash?
A whitewash.
It's very difficult if you put such an important organisation on the run, as it were, that they simply will have no idea how to behave, how often to look back as they run, you know, how frightened to look, how apologetic to look, how to avoid the worst catastrophe. So it's not as though you could say, oh, there was one way the Church should have functioned at the very beginning. The issue is that the Church had such power, and that power became abuse, and that abuse was sexual abuse, and that happened to so many vulnerable young people whose lives were destroyed, and that has to be dealt with.
The failure of the Catholic hierarchy to deal with abusing priests was not just confined to Donegal. One story still unresolved goes all the way to the very top of the Irish Catholic Church and could have explosive consequences. It involves Cardinal Brady, Primate of all Ireland,
the last few days have been among the most extraordinary,
and the country's most notorious paedophile priest, Father Brendan Smith. At its centre, a boy who in 1975 reported Smith's abuse to the Cardinal, hoping to end the abuse of him and other children.